Imene Trabelsi is from the International Committee of the Red Cross. Welcome to the programme. What are your teams telling you on the ground?
Hi, thank you for hosting me. So our teams are currently present in the most affected cities. We're talking about Latakia, Aleppo, Hama, Idlib, and Tartus. On a day-to-day basis, and since the earthquake, our teams have been reporting scenes of distress, massive waves of displacement. People lost homes, lost loved ones, got severely injured, and even those who did not lose homes, they're too afraid to go back to their still standing building, afraid of a sudden collapse. And people are sleeping in their cars or even on the streets sometimes because the shelters available cannot host everyone who needs urgent support. So at the moment, of course, there is a huge urgent need in order to channel further aid, but there is also a component that needs to be taken into consideration, that the earthquake hit one of the most impacted areas across Syria from the 12 years conflict. This area has been fragilized on all levels. Population are particularly vulnerable economically. Infrastructure was already very damaged and very weak. And therefore, what's happening today is is crumbling the little still standing infrastructure left after 12 years of conflict. The situation is, the least that we can say about it is dire. At the moment, our teams are supporting the Syrian Arab Red Crescent in order to prepare the shelters with the most essential needs, but also rehabilitate some of the newly established, repurposed schools or mosques with lights, with water trucking. But again, the needs are massive, and all support that could be done in order to channel further aid, further support from all actors is more than welcome and life-saving at the moment.
I don't know if you managed to hear our interview with Syria's ambassador to China, who was calling for the international sanctions on Syria to be lifted. Is that the only way that there can be an effective aid operation to the earthquake victims there?
Well, the Syrian crisis is very complex, and the aid channeling challenges are complex themselves. But let's admit it, and it has been the case over the past years. We have been quite clear as the International Committee of the Red Cross or other humanitarian actors that the sanctions did indeed have consequences on our capacity in order to deliver our aid programming. And for instance, over the last years, there has been some kind of a shift in order to work also on longer term and mid-term projects that could sustain the vital infrastructure, but in what we call the early recovery process. But one of the materialization of how the sanctions did impact our capacity to do that is that, for instance, let's take it as an example, even channeling most essential equipment in order to work on the rehabilitation of infrastructure is hindered by the sanctions. And that, in addition to the fact that the sanctions, although we do acknowledge that it's a legitimate tool to maintain and restore peace, but at the same time it had massive consequences on the population. Today, 90% of the population across Syria are living under poverty line, and the concentration of poverty, of accentuated humanitarian need is definitely much more significant in northern areas, namely the area hit massively by the earthquake during a few days ago.
You and your organisation have sadly vast experiences of dealing with tragedies like this. What are you expecting in the coming days and the coming weeks?
We are definitely in the indicators do showcase that the upcoming days the humanitarian needs are not going to decrease, and they are on the rise. But further than that, what we want to remind the world is that the Syrian humanitarian crisis was standing even before this catastrophe occurred. So it's very important today to acknowledge the fact that over the past years there has been a decrease of attention, of support in terms of aid support, in terms of humanitarian support, and our capacity in order to deliver much needed support by the population. We're talking about a country of 18 million, among which 15 millions are in need of some kind of humanitarian assistance. So today, in addition to the emergent and increased needs that this catastrophe has generated, it's also very important to acknowledge and to recognize the fact that there is a need, an urgent, vital need to work on the longer and the midterm, the post-catastrophe response, which will be the hardest part of the job, because the population in these areas and across Syria do not just need immediate relief, they need solutions.
And the solutions from the International Committee of the Red Cross, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming on the programme.